So for the record now, it is 5:04 p.m. Today is Tuesday, June 16th. Not May. I just realized that says May on our agenda. Tuesday, June 16th, 2020, and this is a regular meeting of the Board of Finance. Item 1 on the agenda, I will entertain a motion to accept the minutes of the joint meeting with the Board of Education held May 5th, 2020.
Right. So
Anderson.
I heard Mr. Wright and a second from, I have John Black.
Anderson.
Thank you. From Chris Anderson. Questions or comments on the motion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Item 2 on the agenda, I'll entertain a motion to accept the minutes of the special meeting held on May 11th, 2020.
So moved.
Anderson.
So I heard Mr. Anderson and I heard Mr. Bushka. Questions on the minutes?
None.
Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Item 3 on the agenda, I'll entertain a motion to accept the minutes of the joint meeting with the council held May 18th, 2020.
So moved. Second.
Right, and I heard Mr. Bushka. Questions on the motion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed or abstentions? Here's what I'm writing down as I'm following. Was that the regular meeting with that held on May 19th? Is that what I just had them approve?
No, that was the
No.
joint meeting with City
With the
Council
city-
on the 18th.
Okay, so 4, vote to accept the minutes of the regular meeting held May 19th, 2020.
So moved.
Second.
Mr. Wright and Mr. Bushka. Questions on the minutes?
I do have some questions on that one.
Yeah,
In the minutes, it was talking about the Board of Ed going back and getting or renegotiating or getting a credit from the transportation. They mentioned that they did, but I haven't seen what that number would look like. The second thing was there was another formal request for the Board of Ed salary breakdown in those minutes that I was hoping to get prior to the budget time period. I still haven't seen those salary breakdowns, so I'd like to get a copy of those.
okay, all right. I'll reach out to the Board of Education and get a breakdown of the salary line items. I know that things were kind of happening fast and furious towards the end there. And I know that they've had some change in their financial department staffing recently. So I'll reach out and see if that's something that they can work on for us and get to us quickly.
So
And for the, go ahead.
going to say I got one additional comment there.
Yeah,
The May 19th was when we established the COVID budgeting. So we actually talked about it in the May 5th meeting. It got established in the May 19th meeting. Here we are a month later and still haven't seen anything from the Board of Ed on where they stand with the savings and or expenses on the COVID side of things. So can somebody from the Board of Ed, maybe Mr. Aram, provide a timeline when they're going to be able to provide that information to us?
and I don't know that we have anybody from the Board of Education that's participating on this call today. So what I'll do is I will do an email to the Board of Education, to Mr. Aram, or Superintendent Lebomsky is really where I should direct that. And with these questions, and I'll CC the Board of Finance just so that if there are any other requests that I miss, you can get that. And remind everybody how to avoid an e-meeting. So just to be clear, we're looking for their salary breakdown. And as I recall, that breakdown was supposed to be in a number of columns. The column that for salaries being expended out of the operating budget, and salaries being expended out of grant funds. So I can ask for that.
Including the Alliance.
Okay. All right.
I believe it was Mr. Bayes that asked for that information early on.
It was. All right. I can speak to the question on the COVID, the account 282. We have just a Word document that was provided to us a couple of weeks ago when we were meeting with the superintendent and the business director to identify the expenses that they thought might qualify for reimbursement. And it was about $380,000. I can share that document with the Board of Finance. But to your question about when are they going to transfer those expenses into the COVID 282 account, I know, as I said, that there's been a change in their financial office staffing. And Alice and Ed were talking about this, this very function. So I'll remind them that that's something we need to see. Also, when it comes to this COVID 282 fund, one of the things that I wanted to establish is a process for approving those COVID expenses that get charged to that account, and a process for the various board reviews, City Council, Board of Education, and ultimately the Board of Finance, because as we continue to try to wade our way through all of the numerous webinars and written documents that are telling us how we apply for reimbursement and where to apply first and who should be applying, it is a little bit cumbersome and complicated. But my thought is that this is something that we should button down for both boards, City Council and Board of Education, then ultimately Board of Finance being that final authority over that account. So I'll include a brief explanation of what I think that process should look like on the COVID 282. And then I didn't get my pen out fast enough. What was the other thing, Lance, that you asked for?
The amount for the bus credit.
Okay, yes. I do believe that I saw that amount in the newspaper that the Board of Ed discussed a couple of weeks ago. So I want to say it was somewhere in the range of $260,000. But I'll get an answer for that as well.
Will that be in the 2021 budget?
No, I think what they did is they negotiated it as a credit on the 2020 against the 2021 expenditure.
Now, you said that the paperwork that you received from the Board of Ed was about a $350,000. You think that's what the number was for the COVID?
Yes, 380,000, I believe, which is why in our budget deliberations we were using that $400,000 number, because it was a ballpark of what we.
Because the joint meeting with the Board of Ed, Mr. Aaron was saying it was closer to 700 at that time.
So that $700,000 number was the surplus. If we removed their COVID expenses out of their operating budget, the surplus was $710,000 that they were projecting
Okay.
at their end.
Thank you.
Yeah. Are there any other requests that we're thinking we want to make to the Board of Education? Okay. I'll do that by way of an email with a CC to the board. And then see what we come up with.
Thank you.
All right. So that was still relative, or yeah, that was still questions in regard to item number 4, which was were the minutes of the regular meeting. Any other questions on those minutes? Hearing none. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Item 5, I'll entertain a motion to accept the minutes of the joint meeting with the City Council held May 21st, 2020.
So moved.
Second.
Anderson.
Thank you, Mr. Anderson, and a second by Mr. Wright. Questions on the minutes or the motion? Hearing none. All in favor?
Aye.
Abstain.
All right,
Abstain.
so 2 abstentions. That would be Board
Boynton.
Member Boynton and Board Member Bushka. All right, motion carries. Item 6, I'll entertain a motion to accept the minutes of the special meeting held May 26th, 2020.
So moved. Anderson.
Thank you.
Second, Bushka.
All right, so I have a motion and a second. Are there questions on the minutes? Hearing none. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Item 7, I'll entertain a motion to accept the minutes of the special meeting held June 2nd, 2020.
So moved.
Second.
All right, so I heard Lance Boynton and I heard Mr. Bushka,
Right.
Mr. Wright.
Correct, Mr. Wright.
Usually, yeah. Usually, if I don't recognize the voice, I see a green highlight of your voice there. So, all right. So I have a motion and a second. Are there questions on the minutes?
No.
Hearing none. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. So item 8 on the agenda is a motion to accept the city's reports.
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Bushka.
Second.
Second, Boynton.
Right. I have a second from Mr. Boynton. Are there any questions on the financial reports or budget performance reports?
Just a quick one. The last time we talked about this, we weren't going to have to use any fund balance. Is that still the case for the June 30, 20 fiscal year?
Yes, and Alice is on the line. I don't know if Alice wanted to speak to that question.
Can you hear me, Mayor?
I can.
Okay, this is the first time I'm using the microphone on my laptop, just so I didn't know if it worked or not. Actually, we are in alignment with the projections that we had at the time that we set the budget, so I think we're okay.
Any other questions for Alice while we have her? Nope. Then I'll call the motion. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Item 9, I'll entertain a motion to accept the Board of Education's budget performance report.
Anderson. Moved.
Thank you.
Right,
Second.
All right, so I have a motion and a second. Questions on the financial reports for Board of Education?
Just to clarify, going back to the 380,000
Yes.
COVID, that is included right now in this report.
So, and Alice, I'm sorry, I let you turn your microphone off. I didn't look at that budget performance report. Those expenses, most of those expenses, are they being reported in their cafeteria fund account?
Some of the, excuse me, some of the expenses would have been in the cafeteria fund account. The others, in my understanding, was some of them were out of the Board of Ed capital for the laptops, and some of them out of the operating. I'd have to get clarification from Mr. Aaron on that.
You know, and to that point, when we talk about the cafeteria fund, because most of the vast majority, other than a little bit of money being spent on those computers was directly the direct result of the food distribution. So that's probably why you're not seeing, if you're looking at where they are in their performance year to date. Other questions? Hearing none.
Well, on that too, just kind of going back to that COVID, the transportation of all the athletic programs, the maintenance of the fields, all of that kind of stuff that's not happening. I haven't really heard anybody from the Board of Ed side talking about the expenses that are not occurring because basically athletics stopped.
And then when we talked about during our budget deliberation, the projected year-end surplus, those are the expenses that would have been a part of that surplus. You know, the coaches, the spring sport transportation funds, officials. So yeah, that would have been part of the 710 in surplus. And I think that what we can do is, if you'd wish, I can see if they can do a summary of where those year-end projections are by line item, something that's less cumbersome than the 20 or some odd pages that you get in a regular budget performance report.
That would be helpful.
Yeah, that'd be helpful, yep.
Yes.
All right. Then, if there are no other questions, I'll call the motion. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. And moving into item 10, I'll entertain a motion to consider business by department heads.
So moved, Anderson.
Thank you.
Second.
Okay, I have a second from Mr. Bushka. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Then, Alice, is there anything else that you wanted to add this evening?
I have nothing. Thank you, Mayor.
And Carol, you're on. Was there anything that you needed or wanted to share?
No, thank you.
Okay. Then we'll move into the next agenda item, which is discussion or consideration of business by the mayor and members of the Board of Finance. Item 11. Do I have a motion?
So moved. Right.
Thank you, Mr. Wright. Do I have a second?
Second, Bushka.
Thank you, Mr. Bushka. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Then we're open. Anything to add, Mr. Boynton?
Yes. One of the things that we were talking about during the last meeting was the referendum that we were discussing and the possibility that it could be on a date other than the normal voting date. I strongly feel that it needs to be on the normal voting date. This is the largest referendum that I can remember. I've been here 20 years. To not have it on the date where everybody's expecting it to be, I think is a disservice. Regardless of the presidential election, I understand the concern that some of the other people were bringing. The bottom line is this is 160 million. And I still can't find 80 million of it. I went back and looked at the 7 other high schools that were built last year in Connecticut. Still can't find the other 80 million. Fairfield, 84 million. Middletown, 96 million. Newark, Norwalk, 50.28. Simsbury, 23.9. Enfield, top of the list at 103. And yet Enfield's only paying for 35 million of that. So because of this dollar amount, I think it's imperative that we get it in front of the entire voting public. It's a very, very big number. And, that's my concern. The other thing that I'd like to bring up is because we are talking about a referendum, whatever the dollar amount ends up being, if this does pass, there's going to be a significant impact to the mill rate moving forward. Maybe not in 2021, but moving forward, there will be. So as we look at our union negotiations next year, as we look at the way that we do business, if we just keep doing what we've been doing, those projections that we have are assuming a flat rate. So the school system mill is a 3 mil impact, and an additional 2 assumes flat. Well, we haven't been flat since I've been here. We've borrowed against the fund balance. So a 5 mil, I think, is underestimated. So next year with these contracts coming up, I think it's imperative that we really start not looking at 2021 and 2022, but really start looking at how are we going to afford the high school, the water treatment facility, and our union contracts. So there's, I know we've talked about it, but I'd like to see how we're going to do something different.
No, I agree. So I'm just going to do a quick answer on your referendum question. So last night, the city council did meet and did discuss the resolution. I did share with them the Board of Finance's discussion about a November ballot. We also did a little research. We went back and looked at voter turnout and responses to referendum questions going back to 2003 for the Torrington school renovation project. And what we found was that with the 3 standalone referendum ballots or referendum questions, we never had more than 12% of the voter turnout for those referendum questions. Torrington School, we had 12%. City Hall, we had 11.8%. So that referendum failed. It went back out later the same year on a standalone ballot, which ended up in a terrible snowstorm, and the voter turnout was 7.6%. We also then looked at what were the 3 referendum years when the referendum questions were on a regular ballot. In 2012, we learned that the 5 charter revision questions, which appeared on the presidential ballot, 54.62% of the voters answered those questions. And then the subsequent 2 gubernatorial election cycles for WPCA improvements and then the road improvement program, in both of those situations, we had 51% on WPCA and 58% for the road improvements. So based on that research, the city council unanimously agreed that it should be held on the November ballot, so that we do get the greatest number of responses, or a reflection of the greatest number of voters. And I do want to thank the Board of Finance, because after listening to your concerns last Thursday, I was thinking along those lines, is how do we get something that answers the Board of Education's concern that that this might get lost in a presidential ballot or election, and yet still provides a little more data to drive the decisions when we make these decisions. Also, right after the discussion, Carol Anderson hunted down a copy of the last ballot where those 5 charter revision questions were done in a presidential cycle, and presented for the city council to see how those referendum questions appear on the ballot, which clearly, and I can send a copy of this to you as well, shows that the referendum questions are actually on the top of the ballot. So even before you get to the section where you can color in the bubble for the candidates, you have to almost read through a couple of those referendum questions. And that was the year there were so many that they actually wrapped around the boxes with the candidates' names. So I think that with that reassurance that the questions are front and center, and that there's a much higher propensity for response on referendum questions. The council did, as I say, unanimously agreed that it would be on the November 3rd ballot. They also stressed, as I'm sure you all feel the same, that we should be doing everything we can to inform the public of the impact of this request. Not only the impact on the mill rate, but over a 20-year period of time, how much are we paying back? You know, we might talk about borrowing 70 million, but over a 20-year period of time, you're paying back 106 million. So we want to make sure questions such as, you know, because you all heard that letter that was sent to you and the city council where the writer asked about what happened to all those buildings. You know, what are we going to do if all of a sudden we have 3 empty school buildings that get returned to the city? What are we going to do with all of those buildings? You know, and that's something that we haven't had a conversation about. You know, if it's one elementary school and central, Bemidji Avenue Central Office Building, you know, maybe we'd be able to figure out a reuse or a purchaser in that situation. You know, but if it's 2 buildings, 2 elementary schools and central office, then that gets to be a little bit harder for us to plan for. So I do think that there's a lot of work to be done on getting some of those answers. So I am grateful that there's a little extra time for us to get those answers. You know, if we'd had a referendum in September, it's not a whole lot of time between vacations and the summer. The Board of Education and the administrative team are going at 6s and 7s right now, just trying to figure out what does school look like when they reopen in the fall. So this, I think, might buy us a little time to get some better answers on those things. So, thank you. Is that it for Mr. Boynton? Mr. Wright, anything this evening?
Yes, I do have a couple of things. First, thank you for the research on the referendums and the turnouts. And Carol, thank you for on whatever research you've done. And I have a quick question. This week I had the opportunity to buy 2 mattresses, and the store charges a $9 REC fee. Can the city charge a fee for disposal of mattresses and pass it through a retailer?
You know, I think that that's such an excellent question and something that I think we have to research over the next year, because as you know, and as has been pointed out, for the last 3 years, we have used fund balance, or we've appropriated funds from fund balance. During our discussion last week, when we were setting the mill rate and adopting the final budget, I did mention that I think that we are now going to have to start thinking very seriously about how we move some of our expenses out of our operating budget. You know, are they user fee based services? I'm not going to mince words. You know, we're back at that discussion about whether or not, you know, we should be looking at the smart waste program. How are we charging for bulk solid waste removal from curbside? So I do think over the next year that is something that we're going to have to investigate and bring forward as a strategy to sort of offset some of the damage we've done. I shouldn't say damage, some of the measures that we've taken this year that create, you know, a budget strategy anomaly. Not damage, it's just an anomaly. So we can look into that.
Thank you.
Anything else? Is that it?
That's for me.
Okay, good. Mr. Anderson?
I was gonna say nothing, but just to piggyback on that, for what it's worth, as we're looking at the trash collection, it's worth recognizing our Public Works Department, because I recently did have a fair amount of trash to deal with. They answered the phone really fast. The vendor USA was able to clarify and it was surprisingly easy to take care of a problem. So just want to make sure I give credit where credit's due. Thank you.
Yeah, I appreciate that. It's one of those underappreciated services that we provide.
Until
Mr.
you
Bush-
need them, then you really appreciate it.
Yeah, exactly. Mr. Bushka?
Just one quick one. I wasn't able to attend the building meeting, the school building meeting. And
Yes.
we're online. I mean, we're on schedule to, I know the
We have-
state's got everything by June. Is it June 30th?
June 30th, yes.
Okay.
Yep. Yeah, so, yeah, they have all of their required approvals, resolutions. Sandra Dawson from Pullman and Cumley is the attorney that's been helping us work through this. Because now that the referendum has been moved to the November election ballot, I know that this requires a little more work through the city clerk's office. So Sandra did tell me this afternoon she'd be reaching out to Carol, because obviously I think the Secretary of State's office has to approve language before it's placed on the ballot. And then, of course, we'll be working with the Board of Education on any of the informational material, keeping in mind that taxpayers' dollars cannot be expended to advocate for or against a referendum question. So I just want to make sure with the Board of Education and through any of the written material that we're observing all of those election laws. But yeah, they're all set. They're ready to go. All right. And I see Miss Pesky is on with a baby, no less.
My apologies.
Don't apologize.
We today was our first solo day. Kate went back to work after her furlough, and Nono's not so hot with an 18-month-old and a 4-month-old. So
That's a judge, right?
yeah. So my apologies for not coming in on time, and I have no questions. Thank you.
Okay, good. All right. So then I'm just gonna wrap this up. As I said, Board of Education is all set, so they're on line to get what they need to do, get filed. We talked a little bit about looking at some of those other operating expenses that now we are almost forced to look at moving out of our operating budget so that we can start to fill in some of those budget strategies. I did also have a conversation with Representative Cook late last week, and I just wanted to make sure that on her radar, as they think about whether there's a special session or going into the next session, some of the concerns that I have, with the state's budget, some of the, and it may just be me overthinking things, but when I think about all of the changes that the boards of education across the state are going to be making with distance learning and smaller classroom sizes, and what does that look like and what will it cost, it also occurred to me that these are some of the measures that sort of force that next level of teachers that maybe qualify for retirement but have been hanging in there. A few of my friends are perfect examples that have now all of a sudden decided that they're going to retire. What is going to be the impact on the teachers' pension fund, reflecting on the fact that 2 years ago the state was starting to push some of those, or proposing to push those teacher pension obligations to the municipalities. So just wanting to put all of that stuff on everybody's radar, because we don't know what this looks like next year. But I think having this conversation every time we meet to remind ourselves what those are, so that we're not finding ourselves sort of unprepared or surprised next year at this time. And with that, I think I have no further business for you, so I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved. Anderson.
Thank you.
Second.
Okay, so I have a second from Lance Boynton. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? We're adjourned. Thank you all very much.
Thank you.
Night.